So this is Mr. Baker, Athletic Director at WVU. He's going to speak for a few minutes kind of about his life and career, and then open it up to questions for you guys. So if you'll please make sure you're not on your phone, you're paying attention, and then most of it's going to be you guys asking questions and him kind of giving his answer with his expertise. So this is Mr. Baker.
Well, it's great to be with you all, and we were going to do this probably on Zoom, but I have to be here tonight for another event, so I'm glad I got to be here in person. Early in my career, I was an athletic director and principal in the public schools. I was actually principal in middle school, much worse behaved than you all, I'm sure. But so it's always good to be back in this setting and be in public schools. I'm a big believer in public education. I was born and raised in rural Oklahoma, first generation college student, and public education every step of the way. Every one of my degrees came from public education. So I do believe it's the great equalizer. So I would encourage you to do everything you can to take advantage of the opportunities that you have. Didn't know growing up that I wanted to be in college athletics. Really didn't know what an athletic director was at the collegiate level. But I went to my undergrad. I was actually going to major in computer science. I was born in 78, and I graduated high school in 96. So you all won't remember this, but there was this thing called Y2K, and computer systems were only built to go to 99. They thought they would all crash, and everybody would lose their money in banks, and all this other kind of stuff. And so I was really more focused on how can I make money. And so that was going to be a field that I was going to be able to do that. And I was in the honors program at a small regional university, southeastern Oklahoma State. Me, Reba McIntyre, and Dennis Rodman are some of the alums there. It's a pretty eclectic group. But one of the duties that you had to do is the high school students coming in, you interviewed them for spots in the honors program. And I remember this distinctly. There was a young lady that me and the faculty member were interviewing together, and he asked her what she was going to do. And she talked about she wanted to be an educator, but she said, I'm going to major in finance because I think I need to make more money. And so you all haven't met college faculty yet, but they do pick some high horses to ride on. And so he told her, you need to follow your passion. And basically your eyes lit up. We talked about being a teacher, and that's what you need to do. We need people like that in education. And and I had no idea what impact it had on her, but I went home and I couldn't sleep because I was not passionate about computer programming. It was something I was going to do to make a living. And so shortly after that, got into a series of coaching basketball class that I took for fun in college, just so I could have the hours to be full-time and not too hard to load, to be honest. But I love it. And I found my passion, I found my purpose, and from there, it's led me to opportunities that allowed me to be here. And so I could elongate that story and take a lot of other steps, and I'm a person of faith, so I think God put some opportunities in front of me along the way. But I think the fact that I was passionate and I felt like I had a purpose also led me to the opportunities that I had. So, I think the thing I would tell you, society really conditions us to focus on results. So, you play sports, if you ask somebody, if you go play a game, you go home, your parents are usually going to ask you, how much did you win? How many points did you score? What they don't ask you is, how did you build confidence? How did you make your teammates better? How did you learn to play within the team? People only want to focus on the results. The problem when you're only focused on the results is there's only so much you can control of that. If you're an offensive lineman on a football team,
So you say you grew up in Oklahoma, right?
Yes.
Okay, so did you grow up a state fan or you an OU fan?
So I'm a first-gen college student, as I mentioned. Both my dad and grandfather left high school early, actually, to get a job. So I was one of the first males to graduate high school. So my family didn't make me be a fan of one or the other. So football at OU was really good. Basketball at Oklahoma State was really good. I was probably a little bigger Oklahoma State fan, but I didn't grow up hating Oklahoma. Most people in Oklahoma is one or the other. Yeah, so I grew up in a town of 800 on 80 acres, 8 miles from town. So it's a very rural part of Oklahoma in the southeast corner of the state.
So with you being a state fan, you know WVU got playing now in the Big 12. You root for WVU?
1000%. Yeah. I lost my best line. People used to ask, I was at the University of North Texas before I took the WVU job. And people would say, are you for Oklahoma State or the Mean Green? And I would say, before I was Mean Green, I was Money Green. Whoever's paying me, I'm for them. So since our colors aren't green, I can't use that. But no, I am 100% for the people I work with every day, the young people that I get to see practicing and learning from mistakes and overcoming adversity. It doesn't take long before you feel a connection, and that's where your heart lies.
All right.
Hi, my name is Maxine. So I'm a varsity softball player here at PHS. I played softball for a long time, but softball is not a sport at WVU. So I was wondering how you choose which sports you allow to be at your school.
Yeah, most of it goes back to historical. It's a great question. When I was at UNT where I left, I was in Texas, and we actually didn't have baseball. So everywhere that I went, people wanted to know when we were going to have baseball. And when I came to WVU, I'm like, finally, I don't have to answer this question about when I'm going to have baseball. But we had softball in North Texas. We don't have it here, so I get the question a lot. I am a huge college softball. So obviously in Oklahoma, it's a huge sport. You got 2 perennial top 10 teams there. We had a great team at UNT. So it's something that it could be on our radar screen in the future. Here's the reality. You see our budget, and it seems like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money. But in the Big 12, if you take out what we have to spend to travel, because we're a geographic outlier, and you take out what we spend to pay for facility debt, so improvement that we've done to facilities, what we have left is at the bottom of the league. And so to add another sport, we would have to have some donors who would give us enough money to support the cost of doing that. There are some that express some interest, but not at the level that would be required for us to undertake adding another sport. But I do think it's something that's on our radar screen as we go through developing a strategic plan these next 3 to 6 months. We'll look at our sports sponsorship and are we in the right sports. But just know I would much rather watch college softball because it's fast-paced, it's action-packed, than a lot of sports that are a little slower.
So to go along with that, with women's sports, how do you feel that Title IX has changed your job and your perspective, making sure women's sports get the recognition they deserve?
Yeah, for most of my career, Title IX was already in place, so I didn't have to make a ton of personal changes. But as a father, I have 2 daughters. They're 11 and 8, and they unfortunately I thought they would be hoopers, but they do gymnastics, dance, and a couple other activities. But I've not been able to get them in softball or hoops or anything like that. But I think it's important, and I think there should be equal opportunities. It has definitely caused college programs all over the country to create more opportunity for women's sports, and now you're seeing just in the last year, just in the last couple of months, what the numbers that the women's NCAA basketball tournament did were incredible. They posted some huge numbers of viewership for some of those games, and so those opportunities are very important, and I think Title IX is a very good thing to have in place.
My question is, what are your thoughts on transfer portal, specifically like basketball?
Yeah, I have mixed emotions about the transfer portal. I think on one hand, there are a lot of student athletes that probably don't battle through the adversity and overcome situations in their current institution because it's just easier to hit reset and go somewhere else. And there's a certain amount of learning and growth that occurs with those opportunities in life. And I think generally there's less and less of those opportunities in life. And as a parent, probably one of the things that I battle the most is not wanting to fight all the battles for my kids, to make them have to battle through it themselves. And they started even at a young age, they're trying to open candy, and my wife would be like, don't open it for her, let her figure out how to open it. But you as a parent, you want to do that, but what happens is eventually your parents are gone, and you got to fend for yourself. And so I think college has generally been a place where people grow and learn from those experiences. And when you have people playing for 4 and 5 programs in a single college career, and that's happened, I wonder how much growth has occurred for those individuals as opposed to making things work where they are. However, they're adults, they're young adults, but they're adults, and their coaches can change schools. I can change schools. And so saying that you don't have the opportunity to change if it's an environment that you don't feel like you're growing in or you fit in, is tough as well. So if it were up to me, I would probably give a one-time free transfer with no penalty. After that, you'd have to sit out, or there'd be some type of penalty until you graduated. And if you're a grad transfer, you still have eligibility left, then fine, you can use that somewhere else, because at that point, you've done what you're supposed to do, you've stayed on track. So that's probably where I would handle if it was up to me. But there's a lot of people that have opinions there, so it ends up being a middle ground a lot of times.
Speaking of the transfer portal, how much do you think all of the transfers coming into the basketball team will help?
I think it'll help a lot. I mean, we have a great program, and there's some very talented young people coming in. Now, when you have people that are coming in the portal, most of the time those are upperclassmen. Most of the time, they're not coming thinking, I'm going to just play a role for a year or two and grow into being a great player later. They're all coming to make a big name for themselves. So the coaching job that our coaches and Coach Huggins will have to do will be a little bit more difficult, right? Because you're trying to have people that can take their personal goals and set them aside a little bit to accomplish the team goals, and hopefully they can get both of those things done. But if you're going to be successful in college athletics in a conference as tough as the Big 12, you've got to have some success in the portal. You've got to bring great student athletes in, retain as many of them as you can, and be able to go both into the high schools and the portal and supplement that. And I think at WVU, taking high school kids and growing them into great players is always going to be a core piece of who we are. But the transfer portal has also got to be a core piece of how our success is going forward.
What changes are you wanting that we can expect to see in the WNBA?
Yeah, I think a lot of the changes that we'll be focused on, you won't necessarily immediately see. So I, for instance, think we need to create a lot more revenue from outside events. You don't want a football stadium that's used 6 games a year. It's like building a house and you only do holidays in it. Doesn't make a ton of sense. And so we're really looking at how can we host more wedding receptions, more birthday parties, more corporate events. How can we do that at the Coliseum and at Pushkar Stadium? So, but where that will translate is the more of those things that we can do, the more we can help our budget. And if we can grow our budget and get all of those teams more, you look at some of the success that our teams are having when they have budgets in the bottom 3 or 4 of the league. If we can get them just to the middle of the league, I think they can compete at a very high level. So we're really focused on a lot of that. We want to enhance the game day. Matt Wells is here. Matt Wade. How long have you been here, Matt?
You're 21.
21 years. So he oversees our marketing and game day promotions and all that. And so we feel like that we need to put more money and more emphasis into that. We've always just relied on people from West Virginia just coming because we're the Mountaineers concerts and pregame events that we can host and make it about more than just the game, the better we're going to do from an attendance standpoint.
Mr. Baker, how are you?
Hello, good.
I was wondering how hard was the transfer here at WV? Like, was it an easy transfer? You feel at home here, or you more used to somewhere else?
Yeah, so we were within 3 hours of all of our family where we were at in Texas. So I grew up in the furthest southeast corner of Oklahoma, the county that bordered Texas and Arkansas. So, and I was living in basically Dallas-Fort Worth. And we had had some other opportunities to leave. We had not left. So I have a wife, 2 daughters, and 2 dogs, and they're both girls. So I don't make a lot of decisions at home. But the more that we looked into the WVU, we really didn't know a lot about West Virginia. So in North Texas, we're in the same conference as Marshall, so I've been to Huntington a couple of times. But I didn't know it at that time. But the more that we looked into it, the more I felt like it was a great place to raise a family. It's a beautiful country. I'm an outdoorsman. I love to be outdoors. Really, the more the people, I learned about people here, they're very similar to the way I grew up. Oklahoma culture, especially rural Oklahoma, is very similar to here. Just good, honest, hardworking, fair, kind people. And the people here treat us great. So the transition for me has been really good. My family's finishing up the school year in Texas. I didn't want to move them in the middle of the year. So that's been hard. But thankfully we have FaceTime, and sometimes my daughters don't seem as interested in FaceTiming me as I am them, which hurts my feelings. But that part's been a little difficult, but the people here have been incredible.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Brielle. I'm a competitive golfer, and main focus is education, and I always wanted to go to WVU for med school, but they don't have a girls golf team, which is a lot of, makes a big deal. Do you see WVU getting a golf team anytime in the recent future?
So it kind of goes back to that same question with softball. Maybe we should just have a death match between softball and golf and see who wins.
I'll fight. I will fight.
No, I mean, there's not immediate plans, but women's golf would be a sport that's easier to add, lower numbers, not a super expensive sport. But I believe that the first thing that we have to do is provide a championship level experience for the sports that we currently have. And so I wouldn't want to start a sport unless we were going to be able to support them at a high level where they can compete for championships. And I would not want to bring a new sport in and give them that without our current sport. So if you come to WVU, you see what we do for men and women's basketball, what we do for football. It's very high level. Women's soccer gets a good experience, but we have some student athletes. Our track and field facilities need a lot of work. Our women's tennis facilities need work. We have some sports that we need to do some things for to give them that kind of experience. So I think my obligation is first to those student athletes before I take our resources and dilute them for other sports.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I will say this, on how many of you want a career in college sports. You asked me about the transition. So my wife and I believe we had 6 homes our first 13 years of marriage. And they were all great promotions and opportunities. But we took the approach. I had a former NBA player tell me early in my career I was making a move. And he said, hey, I played NBA, I played overseas, he went through all these countries and places. And he said, my wife, the whole time we were gone, everywhere we went, she just talked about missing home and how she wanted to go back home. He said, so finally I retired from playing, got a day job, and we went back to, they were from Tulsa, we went back to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And he said, we'd been home about a month, and she looked at me and said, I wish I would have taken time to enjoy all the places that we've been. And so I think you have 2 perspectives in most issues in life, right? You know, you can control how you react to it. But as a family, we've always tried to take the approach of, we're not going to talk about what we miss from where we were. We're going to talk about all the new experiences we get, all the new friends we're going to make, all the new relationships we're going to build, the places we're going to see, and the cultures we're going to learn when we've gotten a chance to move. And coming from a small town where I'm the only one in my family that doesn't live within 2 miles of where they were born, I think, I just have taken that approach, and I've loved where I've gotten a chance to be. last move.
Hi, my name is Susie, and you said that you were a teacher once?
Alright, so interestingly enough, I was a principal. So when I was a GA, did my master's in education, I taught some introductory health courses at Oklahoma State. I got my master's at Oklahoma State. And I was a GA for the men's basketball program, and I taught adjunct. And so then I was getting married, and GA ship was up. Oklahoma State had hired me on part-time in basketball operations, which those people made good money now, they didn't then. My alma mater, where I graduated high school, they had an opening for a principal and athletic director. And so my former student council advisor, who had worked her way up to superintendent, called me and offered me the job. I said no 4 times, and the 5th time, the money was more than I thought I could ever spend. Now I didn't realize having 2 daughters how fast they can spend money. So I went back home. So I never actually was a classroom teacher. I went from just an adjunct professor or instructor at Oklahoma State to I was a principal at 26 years old. Still the youngest principal ever at Oklahoma. But that's kind of how that happened.
What school were you a principal?
Valiant Middle School, and I was the AD of the entire public schools there. Which is where I went to school. So about 70 or 80 kids a grade. K through 12 was maybe right at 1,000 students. And when I took that job, I really thought I left public education. But it just back to your purpose and opportunities, and if you're following your purpose. I was a principal for a year and got a call from President Rogers State University, which is a small college, about 4,500 students. And he said, I want a young, up-and-coming athletic director who can also coach basketball. And I went and met with him, he offered me the job. I was not the most qualified. I was at a rural K-12 school, but he gave me an opportunity. So I was a basketball coach for 2 years and the AD for 5. They're a Division II school now, they were NAIA at the time. And then went to Northwest Missouri State University, which is another D2 as the AD, very good Division II program. Then University of Memphis as the number 2. It's my first job in Division I. Then I went to Missouri in the SEC as the number 2 person there. Then North Texas as the AD. And I was there for 6.5 years and got the opportunity here.
So like coming into WVU, are there any like coaching staff changes or any sports you're looking at making or anything?
Well, I think you have to evaluate everything, but I certainly want to give everybody that is at WVU the opportunity to demonstrate their abilities to do the job, that they've been hired to do. And they're all great people, and I don't want to come in with preconceived notions that you read this or heard this. I want to share with them my expectations. I want to help evaluate them and give them a fair chance. I want to treat them the way that I would want to be treated if I was coming in new. But as much as I talked earlier about the process and how important it is, and sometimes you can't control the results, I also know that you have to produce results. And so it's really a combination of, are you giving student athletes an experience that they feel good about? And we do surveys every year, so we know how the student athletes feel about how their coaches enrich them, help them get better, treat them as people, and then the results-based equation as well. But those results are not just athletic performance. We care, are you graduating young people, are you helping them grow as individuals as well?
My name's Caden. I was just wondering how you're dealing with everything going on with Coach Huggins.
Well, you do this long enough, you have to deal with a variety of things. You all may not know, but before I came in here, we released a statement. Coach Huggins is going to remain as our basketball coach. There's some things that he's got to do. We got to learn from the situation together. It's unfortunate. He feels bad. I hate it, but we have a course chart for how we're going to move forward. Those things happen. When you deal, I say this every night. Hello? But as an athletic director, every night I go to bed over 1,000 dormant volcanoes, and you never know which one's going to erupt. And when you have a couple hundred employees and several hundred student athletes, people are going to make mistakes we were able to find resolution on this one.
Thank you.
With your time at West Virginia, do you have like a specific sport that you like to watch the most, like an atmosphere or chance?
I don't know that I have one that I like to watch the most. I've learned to appreciate all of them over the years. I tell you the one that's the hardest for me to watch is basketball because it's the one I'm the most knowledgeable about. So I think sometimes watching sports, ignorance is bliss. So basketball, I'm over there coaching it in my head the whole time. Whereas the rest of the sports maybe not as much. But I do enjoy watching a well-played basketball game. But I've learned to enjoy a lot of the sports.
My question for you is, with the NIL deals happening, how do you think that has changed college athletics in general? Because of the legal coordinator.
Oh, hey, tell them you'll play out.
Oh yeah, and so I play quarterback here, and I plan to play college football. So I was kind of thinking, when I go to college, I want to get an NIL deal.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, real NIL deals are more about influencers and brands. And so for years, if you built up a following, and you all know this because you're on social media, you can monetize that by promoting products, by even, I think some of those platforms could just pay for your post if you have a certain number of followers. So college athletes were prohibited from doing that. So when the restriction was lifted, it was really to just allow those opportunities and not penalize college athletes. But because the restrictions weren't in place, it very quickly became a little bit different game. It's now part of every conversation I think that's had in the recruiting process. But what I would tell you two bits of advice. One is your image is very important. And in this day and age, everything that you do, everything that you say is always on the record. And so protect that image at all costs because it does have value to you and your family. Secondly, those NIL deals, even the bigger ones that require money, it's a finite amount of money over a finite amount of time, and it can teach you some really bad habits. And so we really encourage our student athletes to manage that money and to not fall in love with having money because it's going to end at some point. But I think it is an important part of the process, and if you have the ability to monetize your name, image, and likeness, I think you should.
Hi,
Hello.
Christy Willis, Superintendent of County Schools. Thanks for being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Could you share with the students, because you've been through the interview process several times, what the interview process was like to achieve this position with the Nuggets?
Yeah, so the first call I got was from a search firm, and I think the question that they asked me was, would you have interest in WU? And my first answer was I had interest in learning more about WU because I don't know a lot. Growing up in Oklahoma and having been in Texas, I knew more since they were in the Big 12. So I went on a fact-finding mission first. Then the first interview was a Zoom interview, and there were 3 people in that interview. The president, Oliver Luck, who's the former athletic director at the WU, Andrew Luck's father. And then there was also the interim AD, who's one of the top administrators at WU, Rob, also. So we had a really good conversation. It was more casual. We didn't go deep diving, but it's hard to Zoom interview. If you've done in-person interviews and then had to do Zoom, it's just much tougher. It's tougher to read the room. It's tougher to understand body language. It's tougher to connect with people by looking them in the eye. And so, but I think I had done enough Zoom type things to do a good enough job with that, and I was invited to go in person. And so it was a wild time. We had a home game that week in North Texas. I really did not have a lot of time. Like if this happens in the summer when it normally happens, you can do all your research and have pages of notes and know everybody's background. But in this case, it was, I think I got a call on Thursday that they would like to see me Sunday in Atlanta. And so flew out, played the game Saturday night, flew out Sunday morning, did an in-person interview in Atlanta. There were 2 or 3 more people in the room for that one, a deeper dive conversation. The first interviews, probably 45-minute Zooms. That second one was an hour and a half. And I just tried to be myself. I loved where I was at, had a great situation. I think I have always interviewed better when I didn't feel pressure. So I got on Jordans right now. I wore Jordans that day. I was like, hey, if they're going to hire me, I want them to know who I am. And so, but it went well. President, he's just an incredible person, a giant in higher education. He had a great vision for what we can be, and I had a vision for what we could be, and those two things aligned pretty quickly. And I think I interviewed on Sunday, and sometime Monday they offered me the job. I took a couple of days to make a decision, which I think was longer than they wanted me to take, but I wanted to be sure about it, and so then we were moving from there.
Now, what is your main focus or goal at WVU?
First of all, I just want to say there's some unbelievable heads of hair in here, and I wish I had that. Like, enjoy that while you got it, because you get my age and you wish you would. I wish I'd have grown my hair out longer when I was younger. I think for me, the first goal I want is for all of our student athletes when they leave to feel like we give them an opportunity to be their best. That they were able to grow and learn and become a better human being, that they were able to get a great education, and that they were able to exceed at their craft in collegiate athletics. If you do that, the winning really takes care of itself. And I really believe that. So I've just always stayed laser focused on how can we recruit the best young people in our program, and how can we provide them an experience that's best in class, that's as good as they can get anywhere. And that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to spend the most money to have a lazy river at the practice facility. I'm talking about just the opportunities to be enriched, to be cared for, to be loved, and to be helped to be a better person.
Yeah, I know that better coaches and teachers usually